I haven't sat next to somebody this close to do it before, so I'm like, oh, okay, this is fun. Let's just start.
I saw your interview with Bree. It was pretty close.
Yeah. Bree's a really good friend of ours. And Thank you for watching that. This is that same moment where you're like, oh, when a friend watches your podcast or reads your book, you're like, oh no, I feel that way right now. But thank you for watching.
Of course. No, it's good to hear the style, the tone, kind of the engagement level. Like sometimes people are really like, just check out what the vibe is on these.
So then you must know that the first question is, what were you like in high school?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And I was like, I wanted to think of a good answer. I think most people probably say awkward, which I definitely had my awkward moments. But I think for most people who are children of immigrants, you learn to be an adult really early, right? Whether that's you're the translation person for your dad, your mom, you're taking phone messages down. I felt like I was their personal translator yet assistant. And so I remember in high school, I always had what my next thing was. So I always had a job after school. And when that school went on like winter break, I had another job. So I would work Macy's when my after school job being a nanny was on hiatus. So I remember going to school and then going straight to my job.
Dang.
And so I felt like I always had that Asian immigrant child of immigrant hustle culture at a very young age. And so I think my mindset was probably like always what's in that future, or just preparing myself for this next inevitable step of what happens after high school and making sure like when I leave the house, I have somewhere to go or have some kind of backup.
So as an Asian American and then coming from an immigrant household, I feel like it's typically accountant, doctor, or lawyer. For Filipinos, it's nurse, but you didn't go into any of these. So how do we get from like that to advertising?
I definitely credit my mom for this. I had a realization about 2 years ago where I just called my mom. I was like, Mom, thank you for believing in me. So as a child, I loved to draw. That was just my thing. I loved to doodle, and my mom always put me in those classes. Yeah, I had my math class, my Kumon class. I had like my English lesson class, but I always had an art class. She always knew that art was going to be something I did. And when times even got a little tough in our house, yes, the piano lessons went away, the math lessons went away, but my art class still was a thing. And my mom actually found this amazing art teacher that came from China. And he would just have the classes in his apartment, in his downstairs living room. And he just had a bunch of us children with really professional easels actually doing hand graphite and charcoal drawings. And so my sister, who's 10 years older than me, and it's just the two of us, she had a boyfriend at the time. And his sister was actually a creative director. She worked at a big accounting firm as their lead creative. And so I got to see what 15 years in the future could look like. And I am pre-LinkedIn, I'm pre-Facebook. And so when I saw a woman kicking butt as this power woman with 3 kids, breadwinner, a creative, I was like, oh my gosh, what school did you go to? How do I do this? You look like, yeah, I want to be you, right? You're super cool. And so she said she went to art school. And as an Asian children, right, that's really scary to tell your parents. I would like to go to this place called Art Center. I might as well say Hogwarts, right? It's so, and so when I said this, they were like, huh. But they had this woman to vouch against. And it's called Art Center College of Design. It was in Pasadena. She studied graphic design. And I told my mom that, and she actually started telling her friends, like my daughter's thinking about the school. And this is no way a comparison or any fact, but there was at least, I think there was an article that said like, Art Center was the Harvard of art schools. Again, I don't know why that really came out as an article, but she was able to go, okay, this isn't a complete joke, right? There's probably some career past this. Why don't you give it a shot? And so while, yes, doctor, lawyer, engineer would have been so wonderful for my parents, I think because I was so much younger than my sister, being the youngest child, I think I got to be a little bit more on my own of what I wanted to do. And the fact that she always believed in me and thought that this could be something was really interesting. And I'm grateful that I have a career in it now.
Yeah, and you've crushed it. I'm curious to know how your dad's reaction to it was.
That's a good question. Yeah. I think even to this day, when I see my dad, I'm now in my 40s, and I'll see my dad and he'll be like, have you ever thought about getting your MBA? Just like, no, Dad, I'm like 20 plus years into my career. I think I'm past the MBA. Yeah. I'm doing pretty good with my career. And he's like, yeah, but it might help. So I think to my dad, what I'm doing is still very foreign. He doesn't really know what I do. I can send him all the articles, all the campaign awards, and he's okay, cool. But yeah, you probably should look at that further education. So I would say my mom has a better idea of what I do. My dad's still, okay, yeah, but set in more of his old ways. But no, I think regardless, they're both pretty like good that I'm able to hold my own.
Yeah, it's funny because my mom and dad, the dynamic was maybe a little similar.
Okay.
My dad was a little bit more like, I told him I wanted to go to hair school. And he was like, I'm not going to pay for that. Yeah, if you're gonna try and go to hair school, which is maybe more artistic. Whereas my mom was always like, you can be a rock star, you could be a dancer. She thought I could be a basketball player though, like that. There's something about moms, right? Where just like follow your dream.
Yeah.
And it seems like you're pretty happy in your career.
Yes. My mom always said that if you love what you do, you can succeed in it. And I just love that she just was always, if you can't follow what your heart is into, you can't be successful. And that's probably what your mom thought too. If you just believe in it or you just enjoy it, then you actually have that room to actually soar.
Yeah, I love that. So how did you get into, because it was graphic design to begin with.
Yes.
Was this like you were watching, I don't know, what we were talking about on the way here, X-Men or something, and then you wanted to draw comic books and that's how you got into it? Or what was the first thing that got you into drawing?
That sounds pretty close. I love cartoons. Definitely was that kid that woke up every Saturday morning. I would like go downstairs, sleepily hit record on the VCR so I can like catch the 7 a.m. X-Men. Because this X-Men episode was really early.
Yeah.
And then I go back to sleep and then I catch up on the cartoons because for kids these days who can have things on demand, for our older folks like us, it was like cartoons was like 7 to 11 a.m. and that was like it after that for the rest of the day. But you know, I love cartoons. I always loved watching them. When I was in high school, I started loving anime. I was playing video games. I was really into Command and Conquer, Red Alert. So I was always like a gamer as well. Wow. So I really love just this idea of, you can create worlds, right? Imagination is the limit. And I think I was always better at those things, like whether it's writing stories or things that really expounded upon like what we look at the world and how we can make it better. And so I just knew creativity was more my thing. My junior year of high school, I actually had opportunities to have scholarships. So I had a scholarship for Academy of Art in San Francisco and a scholarship for Stanford. And I took classes at both. So I don't remember how it worked, but I think it was like the first half was Academy of Art and the second half was Stanford. And I took about 2 classes at each. And I just loved the Academy of Art, right? Stanford's still a really cool school. Probably made my parents a lot happy if I went there. But I just loved the people I was around. I just thought the conversations were so different. How we looked at the world and going, if we just did this and that, it would just make the world better, right? It was like these people that thought about things in a way of innovation versus following kind of a system. And I think for me, that really goes, that's the room I want to be in. And so early on, I was like, okay, I know those are the kind of people I want to be surrounded by.
Yeah. Wow. That's really incredible. I think it's great, like, when you have the foresight at such a young age to be like, hey, these people are really creating change and potentially really impacting culture as opposed to following a system. And we see now, and this is a little off topic, but we see now how like that following that structure is almost falling apart because creativity has been democratized. So many different types of jobs have been democratized, especially with freelancing, working remote, like all these things. So does that give you like a sense of security as like technologies start advancing and things like just start changing in general in the workforce?
Yeah, I just think it's so exciting. I know sometimes people are really resilient or let's say reticent of what's going to happen. Oh my gosh, I think we've heard this as we're kids, like AI, they're going to take over our jobs, right? All those movies we have when we're kids or robots were taking over, like Terminator, right? Like we had all these things, but I don't know about you, but our jobs have been so heavily bundled. I remember in the beginning of my job, it was like, there was like the studio design team. There was a person that actually organized my Photoshop layers and renamed them. And
really?
Yeah.
Dang.
There was that person that used to find the images, then I could comp with them. My job used to just be like, come up with ideas.
Yeah.
And then I think 2007 happened, the economy went down a little bit, and a lot of the jobs got really compressed into creative director. So now you had to do it all. You were your layout, you were your deck designer, you were the comper, you're the idea. And so I think the time I had to think about an idea, right? If this is the timeline for an idea, before you get to think about this much of it, right? And then this is, okay, someone else is helping you make it happen. I started realizing, then I started going, I have this much time to think about it, and this time is to prep it. And so now with AI, I'm really excited because I'm like, this is going to give me more leg room to sit with an idea because I have help not making the idea, but at least then making it something I can share to a client. And so I love this idea of, we're going to get more space to ideate, to be more creative. And I'm just like excited what that means in terms of the work that we're going to output.
Wow. So you started down a career which is focused around creativity, and you get your first job. Where is that at?
So my first job was at Shy Day.
Nice.
In Los Angeles. It was when they had a section called tequila. So Shy Day Tequila. And it was really neat. My first job, going back a little bit, it wasn't like I was just, okay, I was actually still in Art Center. It was my 8th term. I was like, okay, I need another internship. I was like seeing who I knew. I was like, okay, who do I know that I can ask for this opportunity? And my friend actually brought someone to a housewarming party I had. And I was like, hey, can you call Nick and see if I can go intern for him or freelance or something? And when I showed up with my work, and this is back in the day where you had the mountain and you had the whole portfolio or the sleeves, and he was like, oh, this stuff is great. You should just start freelancing for us. And I was like, of course, I would love to get paid for this. And so I was actually like doing half days at school and then half days at Chiat. And then when I was graduating, I was like, hey, do we want to make this more of a like permanent thing? And I was so lucky. I rolled straight into from Art Center to Shy Day LA. And this is the Department of Tequila. And tequila was really started because it was the interactive portion of Shy Day. So Shy Day at this point was, I don't know about tech, right? I don't know about digital worlds. And we had so much fun because the client was PlayStation. And like I just mentioned, I was a gamer. So I swear I had a little tear. Like when they were like, you're going to work on PlayStation. I was like, oh my God, I can't wait to work on this stuff. And it was so cool. You get the latest games, like 6 months in advance. You get to play it. You get to see it while they're still finishing it up. Wow. And then you get to come up with an idea. And gamers will go to the links for these games. And so we were doing like real world, like scavenger hunts off the internet. People were finding clues. We used to get huge budgets to shoot like green psych, adventure, mocap stuff. This is the beginning of YouTube as well. So we did content series. So for God of War, we actually got a bunch of LARPers dressed as different God of War characters. And you can actually pick 2 characters and they would battle each other. Like just stuff like that, which is fun for SoCom Hell Week because it's a Navy SEAL game. We had gamers that were the best at that game actually go compete each other in the real Navy SEAL world.
Dang.
And so they had to go march through mud, carrying canoes, all these really fun things. And then we shot them as YouTube series.
Wow.
And yeah, I think today this content will still be really cool. But back then it was first time ever doing this content because this is 20 plus years ago again. But it was really cool working at the stuff at the beginning of my career that I was like, gosh, advertising is amazing. It's fast paced. You get to work on so many cool projects. It was also really nice to bounce from subject to subject. Mm-hmm. So when it was oh, you're working on Gran Turismo, so you're working on race cars, then you're working on adventures, the subject matter kept changing. I thought that was really fun.
Wow. It sounds like a lot of fun. What rabbit holes between X-Men and PlayStation that we could go down. But I know that today you're a big advocate for Asians in the workplace and really helping us find our voice and breaking through the bamboo ceiling, you call it, right? What was the moment where you realized that this had to be a thing that you talked about?
I think both of us talked about a really non-linear path into creativity because there weren't people ahead of us doing it. Mm-hmm. We didn't have an aunt or uncle who did this and they were like, oh, you should do this, right? We weren't really exposed to it firsthand because our families didn't do this. And it's not traditional that our families do this. And so how that then becomes is then we get into the workplace and you become the one, right? You're in a team of sameness, and that's typically white, typically male. If anyone's watched Mad Men, it hasn't gotten any better since then. It's been predominantly this way. And so when you and I get into a team and we have a difference of opinion because we have a different background, it gets largely unheard. And so I knew this. I always say in my 20s, I really tried my best to fit in. I listened to one of your podcasts where you're like, maybe I should learn golf. Maybe I should learn sports. Oh, I was the same way. I was like, maybe I should learn rock bands. I was like, I need to probably learn 70s rock because I'm in these rooms and I was like, I didn't grow up with this. We didn't have Sunday Night Football. We didn't have let's listen to the Beatles at home. And so because of this, I'd be in so many rooms. I don't even know the conversation going into the conversation. And so I'd just be like, yeah, cool. I'm sitting there feeling so alienated. And of course, like when they go do something, they're not going to call on the person that's not like them. And so I started realizing that then became the work I was given, because they want to work with the people that they're most comfortable with, because it's subjective. And while every time I would get something that maybe they were like, oh, I don't really want to touch this, I'm not, and I make it something. Like I kick butt, it wins awards, I shine this thing out that they totally thought was going to be a lemon. I'm like, this is my chance. I get to go on that next project now. I'm going to get put on that great project. It's going to look so good for my book. And I'm still not on it. And I started realizing this was happening over and over. And I was like, what does a person have to do here? And then I was like, I had that moment, what am I doing wrong, or how can I show up? And at that time, I think the mentors I had were also in the same group, right? They're also these white males. And the advice would be like, go ask for it. Tell them what you did and just ask for it. I'm like, I have. And it was this thing of, I just felt like maybe I don't deserve it. Maybe I'm not good enough. Maybe I'll just be here at this level. I make good enough salary. I should just be grateful. And I think that's so Asian for us, to be grateful for what we've been given and go, that's okay. That's enough. That's all I need. And I was like, I just want to talk to someone else about it. That's my moment. It wasn't like, oh, I need a breakthrough or that's wrong or anything. I was just like, I wonder if anyone else feels this way. Very simple. And so I just went online and I was just like, okay, where can I find a group of people that maybe have the same kind of parents as me or background that I can just have this conversation with? And when I did my internet search, I found a lot of great advocacy groups for multicultural or minorities. And when I looked at their about page, like their board of directors or members, I didn't see people like you and me on those pages. They're predominantly Black or Hispanic, and I didn't see Asians. And I actually even wrote to them. I was like, oh, I want to be a part of your group. And I didn't hear back. I could have pushed further. I'm sure I wasn't being marginalized, but I just was like, oh, maybe they don't want me there. Maybe I'm the only person going through this. And at this time, I was working at an agency called David and Goliath, and there was 4 other of us, Asians. And I was like, hey, we could start a crew, right? And we had a couple of meetings. I brought all those stats that Asian Americans are least likely to be promoted to leaders. We're heavily unrepresented, and like all these kind of stats. And we're like, yeah, not cool. Let's make this official. And I was already hosting TED Talks. I host TEDx Culver City for the last 10 years. And I was like, yeah, I could put together an event. We could be a panel. It doesn't have to be too much work, pretty experienced. And I think after the 4th or 5th meeting, there's this idea of, do we deserve space? Who are we to ask for something? These other cultures, they might need this more than we do. And I think that's something that an Asian culture is really rooted in others versus ourselves. It's something we do.
Yeah.
And
you related that, sorry to interrupt, but you related that to like our focus on Buddhism at one point? So they say it's really Confucianism, because there's a study out of MIT on the bamboo ceiling, and they said it's 3 H's. It's harmony, hierarchy, and humility. So predominantly in East Asian cultures, this idea of Confucianism is really rooted in the goodness of all. I always give I always compare idioms, like of Western Eastern cultures. Like I was taught the loudest duck gets shot, the tallest bamboo gets cut, the highest nail gets hammered. And what do we say in America? The squeaky wheel gets the grease. Right.
And so when I go into a room and I'm like, I want that project, I need that raise, I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm going to get fired. Oh my gosh, what are they going to think of me? Oh my gosh, what am I going to get in trouble? Whereas other people are like, if I don't do that, it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
They look at it a different way, that for us, it's so much harder for us to get there.
Yeah.
And so I was like, let's just do this. Let's just start this group. And like I said, after the 4th or 5th meeting, I was like, we all agreed not to do it.
Dang.
Yeah, so it could have been a group in 2019, but it wasn't. In the next 2 years, we all know what happened. The pandemic was a big thing. And so I was, like you, probably on Zoom all the time. And one of the things, I don't know if it's just like Zoom, right? There's little boxes and we're all the same size now. So before, me being 5 feet little, like I go into a room and I'm like, oh, that makes sense. I don't take up as much room. Makes sense my 6'3" counterpart is bigger, is louder. But in these boxes, I'm like, I get as much space as that guy. I can now raise my hand emoji. I can now speak as loud as him. I'm sitting just the same distance from the client as he is. And I started to realize oh my gosh, the share of voice I just got was so much bigger. I felt so much empowered by this world because I wasn't made to feel awkward in those preliminary conversations when they talked about sports, right? I can just jump into the meeting. I didn't feel like I was sidelined. I was ready and I was just as tall. And so I think for me, that kind of clicked for me that I deserve a voice or at least a chance to show up. And then I started also realizing that I got invited to rooms because you could start seeing that there wasn't diversity. And so there was times where I was invited into a room, definitely as the token, because I'd be like, what am I on? What project? And they're like, here, this is what you say. And I was like, oh, I see what's happening here. And I always say that what really was that moment of aha was when I watched the CNN special. It was like the ailing communities from COVID. And it was white, Black, Hispanic was the stats. Where were Asians? Kung flu, China virus, Wuhan. So in my mind, I am invisible because I am one-on-one on a team, whether it's female, minority, Asian, now mom. Like, I was one of one. But when I watched that CNN special, I was like, I'm not the only person invisible at work. Asians in America are invisible. We're not allowed to be suffering because we're not Americans. And it made me go, I'm already paying for that URL from 2 years ago. I was like, how hard it would be to just throw a Squarespace site on it.
Yeah.
And back then, which was still pretty fresh, was like Google Hangout. Hey, let's all jump into a Zoom chat and meet each other. I just put it out there. Hey, let's meet each other. Let's share these conversations. Let's just talk about it. What's the worst that could happen? And so this one LinkedIn post, that link to the site, that link to this one setup, I was like, okay, if we can get like 25 people to sign up to have this conversation, that would be a huge win. And when 650 people signed up, I was like, oh, right? There's that many of us out there that feel like this. That's pretty, I was like, oh my gosh, I had no idea.
Yeah.
And so now 2.5 years later, I am so grateful that my one-on-one voice is now one of 6,000.
Wow.
And we're still growing. And that's the idea. Hey, look, even though you could feel alone where you are, there's so much power and we could share this and be a community together, lift each other up.
Wow, that's incredible. Congratulations.
Oh, thanks. No, it's everybody. It's grassroots. It's just a nonprofit effort of great volunteers on my team to keep this community going. And
yeah, it's interesting what you mentioned about in those boxes, you're taking up just as much room as everyone else. When I was a telemarketer at one point, and when I would coach like people that were, I'm going to go ahead and say our size. I'm not the biggest guy in the room either, right? And I'd be like, look, when you're on the phone, they don't know if you're 5 foot nothing or if you're 6 feet tall. So just pretend you're 6 feet tall.
I love that.
And people would always, their performance would automatically improve. Because we're so used to like, you're right, I don't take up that much room. Maybe my voice isn't that loud, like those sorts of things, which I think is crazy. Now that we've transitioned, not all the way, but transitioned out of Zoom calls so much, we're doing a lot more things in person, especially in 2024. I feel like, okay, this is it now. Taking up space, is that still something that gets in your head or in other people's heads? Can you talk about that a little bit more?
Oh, I wish I remembered the name of this creative director, but there's a very famous creative, and he's a man, and he wasn't very tall. And I used to hear stories about how he would bring like a backpack full of stuff and put stuff on the table and like scoot it out to make his space bigger. I don't physically take up space. I don't spread or anything. I feel like you can do other ways to take up space or at least make your presence known of why you belong in the room. So whenever I tell people that I worked on brands, that I'm probably your least expected person. So for instance, I went in to pitch Under Armour Global. And again, I'm not very big. And I walk into this room, and it's this giant room, one of those oval-sized rooms.
Yeah.
Everyone on their team is a white male. Pretty much everyone on my team is a white male, other than the procurement person, right? And so I'm there going, hey, I'm your creative. And I could tell they're looking at me like, you? Right? Like, why are you here? I could tell I'm not their first idea of who should be leading this. And so I always tell people, whatever you can do to solve that before you get into the room. What do you and I do all the time? We Google other people we're going to meet.
Oh, right.
Who's this person? Oh, who's Mikhail? Let's see. And you can definitely put that there, right? For people to naturally find. So I'm going to Google you and I'll be like, oh, okay, cool. You do boxing or sports, right? Look at find your LinkedIn, your Instagram, your YouTube. There's all these things and all these places where you're just talking about yourself. So you can naturally find ways to be like, why should you be in the room? Okay, I worked on these creative brands before. They're in the sports world. Okay, while I don't play football, I've done an Ironman, right? So I've done sport, I have sport mentality. And so I'll just leave those breadcrumbs knowing that they're not going to look at me and know those things, but they're true. Even on, I remember in that deck, I think on the second page, we had pictures of us doing sports. Or maybe we had that at the end. But on the second page, or one of the pages up front where it had all our names, we wrote how sports is related to us. And so I got to write things like, oh, I swam with a great white shark when on a race, right? So I got to write things that still go, okay, that's why she belongs to this room. And so while I don't physically take up room, I try to make sure I say why I'm supposed to be in that room.
Yeah.
Because they're not going to think that when they see me. I know they're probably going to think I'm a little younger than I am. They're not going to think I'm as seasoned because I'm not as gray as some of my coworkers are. Like, I just try to think of these things of what can I do to help mitigate some of the confusion of what I look like.
Yeah, that's interesting. I've felt similar pressures when I'm pitching business or anything like that. Not as much over Zoom, but definitely in person, because I'm in the heart of Orange County. I feel like every person I'm pitching is 6 foot tall white male.
Yes.
And immediately, even that psychological thing of they're looking down to me when I'm shaking their hand. Maybe it's more of a me thing because I might be insecure about that, but I love what you said about just leaving those breadcrumbs and immediately just tackling those and letting them know why you should be in the room. And I wonder if the first photo now is like just me boxing and see what their reaction is.
Yeah, exactly. They'll be like, oh, dang, right? Yeah, and it's being authentic. And I think we talked about humility being an aspect of our culture. It's like a lot of time you're like, should I be saying this? And I'm like, yes, because if you're not invited to golf, that no one's elbow hitting you, like, you need to be able to talk about yourself, or at least have ways that people can talk about yourself. What is Jeff Bezos' famous quote? Your personal brand is what people say about you when you're not in the room. So if you don't know how to talk about yourself, they're definitely not going to know how to talk about you.
Yeah, 100%. When we did that panel together at USC, one of my favorite things that you were talking about was about like getting mentors. And I believe that at one point you mentioned something to the effect of, we feel like we're imposing if we ask for a mentor, but we're not. And I'd love to dive into that a little bit more. Actually, after you said that, I thought to myself on the drive home, I was like, I need more mentors in my life.
Yes.
You know? So who are some of the mentors in your life? How do you approach them? And then for somebody who's like new to it, who's never done that.
Sure.
Yeah.
So first, I read somewhere, people who advance in their careers all have mentors. And I was like, oh. And then I was like, wait, how many? So I did this thing. It's like, how many mentors does that average white man have? Because they're all CEOs. And so they were like, that's when I saw 3 to 5. And I was like, I think I maybe I have one. That's my first initial reaction. I think at this time, the people that I thought that were supposed to be my mentors were my managers. And I'm also not your natural pick as a mentee if everyone in my department relates better to my manager, right? So if my manager wears dunks, loves sports, went to the same college, grew up in the same town, likes the same band, right? I'm your least expected choice, right? No one's going, cool, I'm going to mentee you or mentor you. And I was like really caught off guard when I saw that stat. I was like, oh no, I've been doing this all wrong. And I was like thinking, how can I get a mentor? What am I supposed to do? How do I do this? And I actually went and was like, hey manager, let's go out to eat. And I was like, I see you as a mentor. I just put it out there. I was like, let me just throw it out there on the table and just see how he takes it. And he was like, oh. And I don't think that was a natural chemistry fit. I don't consider him one of my mentors now, but I remember trying to figure out how to approach. And what you're saying is culturally, at least in my household, in Chinese, we have a lot of sayings, all this thing of it's rude. So if I go, hey, I need some advice, it shows you that I don't know what I'm doing, right? That I have deficit. And there's that saving face, or there's all these like cultural terms of, you should just know everything naturally. And how? Like, how? How do you just know things, right? So it's really like interesting that, yes, like having a mentor means you get to look into the future. You get to not have a mistake that someone else did. So it's absolutely imperative to have a mentor. So for people who are like, how do I start? How do I find a mentor? Join a group. So if you can join a group like Asians in Advertising, we have a 6-month mentorship program that we can pair you, whether you want to be a mentor or if you want to find a mentee. So we have that opportunity for you. Colleges usually have these groups. So there's a group for women called She Runs It in the advertising industry. They also have a mentorship pairing. Find a group, find a network. Sometimes they already have these. My friend who runs Asian American Collective, they're doing their mentorship pairing right now too. So I'm seeing more communities create these in these spaces. If you have a manager, if you want to be like me, I see you as a mentor, let's see what happens. You can do it that way. Also, I was just craving female creative energy because I just didn't have that. And so what I did was I just went on LinkedIn and I was like looking at people's faces and I would just write to them, hey, you have an amazing career history. I love what you did for such and such. I've never worked for a woman creative. I'm a new mom. I would love to hear your story. I think I sent 10 that one day I worked up courage. I was like, I'm just going to sit down and do this. And about 8 of 10 of those people responded. And I loved those conversations. And then afterwards, I think I'm still friends with, talk maybe every month with 6 of the 8. And one of them immediately wrote me a recommendation for the job I got next.
Oh, wow.
And so that's the power it can get you. I also just became better friends. You know how we're saying we feel like we're scared to ask for things?
Yeah.
I was like, your mentors are supposed to be your friends. So the idea of, yeah, this person's like super decorated. Like one of my mentors won every single creative award in the book and probably like 10 of them and did the biggest campaigns. He's like a friend now.
Yeah.
I just text him every now and then. Hey, just thinking of you. Saw this restaurant. Think you would like it. Sent you a gift. I'm just like, we're friends. And from going to, oh my gosh, do I deserve any of their time? I'm such a bother to, hey, they're helping me, I'm helping them. And that just gives that real relationship. And even with my mentees down, they are always supporting me and I'm supporting them. And so you don't have to think about, I'm on this side of the bridge and you're on this side of the bridge. It's no, I just think what you're doing is awesome. Can we just like talk here and there? And I think just changing that frame of mind really opened my network to being, who are these people in my support circle? When I have a problem, who can I text? When I'm just like questioning like what my next step is, how to ask for that raise, how to ask for the opportunity, what should I do next for my nonprofit? Who should I be texting? And I think making it so it's not like someone you just text out of the blue versus a friend you're texting.
Yeah. I think that's been one of the things that I've had to wrap my head around, where it's not like you're putting a label on somebody. It's like, you're my mentor now. Like you were mentioning with your manager, you're my mentor. It's like, will you be my mentor? It's just a natural, gradual thing that happens. And I would say that maybe the one that I know for sure is somebody I look to as a mentor. It's like, we don't even talk about it really. I think he knows. Well, I'm also friends with some of the people at his company, and he's probably using me as to help him navigate some of those people as well. But I think that's interesting, and just becoming friends with them, because we look at it as such a Yoda, Luke Skywalker situation.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? And it doesn't always have to be like that.
Yeah, and it shouldn't feel like you're just taking. It should be a reciprocal kind of relationship. And then also finding the mentors that you need in different spaces. So you're not like, oh, I just have to have creative director mentors, right? There's different groups. So it's like your peer mentor versus like craft mentor versus, so there's different categories. So you can figure out who are the people in different categories that you really need.
Yeah. So I'd love to talk about your book, The Visibility Mindset. This is rad. First of all, congratulations on even putting it together. I tried once. I have some notes, and it just didn't work. So
we're going to revisit that because I want to see what you want to put together. I definitely want to talk to you about your future book. No, it's going to happen.
Yeah, but I'd love to talk about yours, The Visibility Mindset. So I think that this is something it's just incredible that you're so, I don't know, it's like an outward focus. A lot of people look at sometimes books as like a way to maybe flex their experience, but really you're sharing a lot of ways that people can start to grow and that type of thing. So if you wouldn't mind just diving into that a little bit.
Sure. I'll tell you how the book happened, because I definitely wasn't like, I need to write a book. That was like not top of mind. I started Asians in Advertising in 2021, March. And I think it was about 6 months later, I received an email from Wiley Publisher, from this wonderful woman named Victoria. And she was like, hey, I found you on the internet. I think she Googled me, or Googled Asians professionals or something, and was able to find Asians in Advertising. Thank you, SEO, right? And she was like, have you ever thought about writing a book for Asian professional growth? And I was like, no, but sure, one day, maybe. That sounds like a great idea. And I was like, oh, what could this mean? And I think the first thing I did was look up what would be my competition. If I put out a book out there, what are people already doing in this space? I think as creatives, we like to do market research. And there wasn't a book out there. And my mom came here in the 70s. She worked. And I was like, how is this possible? How has there not been a book since or ever, right, in this space? And I actually forwarded it to my co-founder of my nonprofit, Jessalyn Lamb, and she saw it and she was like, this is catfishing. She's, what scam is this? And She was, okay, let's just take the call and see what happens. And so on the other line, Victoria, and she was an Asian American woman, and she was like, I want to make Asian authors a thing. I see a void in this market and people have to talk about it. And she was like, I think you have a really good thing going with your nonprofit. Do you want to try to put together some of that wisdom that you're learning and you're spreading out there into something? And I was like, okay, I think I could try, right? I was like, I could try to do that. And what really was the impetus, or I would say the main focus of this book, is to like, what are those things that you're like my mentorship thing, right? That I wish I knew when I was, that would have changed my trajectory altogether. That would have taken those moments I felt insecure at work and given me the tools to know what I was going through, was like the catalyst for the book. I was like, I wish I had this book earlier. And so that is, and why our community needs to know it. I think with the model minority stereotype, this idea that we're just supposed to be good or do good, that everyone else is thriving. So if you're not thriving, you're clearly the outlier. But to put down the stat that it's not you. Asian Americans in this country are seen as doing pretty well, but it's not true. And why it's not true, and put those stats there, right? Those cultural limiting things or the actual data, the McKinsey data behind things, to know that you're not alone. And that's why we should talk about it as a collective to how to move forward past those things.
Yeah, it's funny when you say it's that somebody else approached you about the book. In the world that I decided to live in, social media marketing, it was like somewhere along the way, like influencers decided that it was the thing to write a book. And you can immediately get that vibe just from talking to you and the limited interactions that we've had, that wasn't the reason you were putting it out, was for that. And I think it's really exciting. And I think that the information that you're able to share and your experiences are really valuable. Even here, I'm still learning from you, which I think is great. And now I'm like, mentor? Maybe? Do I put the label here?
Yeah, no. If you ever need anything, let me know. If you ever just want to chat, I'm definitely here. And I definitely want to learn from you and your experiences.
I appreciate that. You mentioned before or maybe we were recording, who knows at this point, but you mentioned that you have over 50 talks booked this year for the rest of the year. Is that right?
Oh, no, not that many. I have maybe 10 more this year.
Oh, 10 more this year.
I did about, I would say, over 60 last year.
60 last year. That's still a lot. And I think what's interesting about this is understanding what's ahead for you, because I know that speaking isn't your full-time thing. You're doing creative stuff. You're at a smaller shop now too. Is that right?
A little bit more complicated.
Yeah.
I'm actually permalancing at 2 shops. So I'm permalancing?
Permalancing. I've never heard that before.
Permanent freelancing. Yeah. So longer contracts for a freelance job. I would say it's more common in the tech world to do this. You bring in someone more longer in-house. And so I have 2 50% contracts, one at RGA and then one for TDW & Co. And so one is more general market. The other one is multicultural, specifically Asian, which is actually really cool to be authentically me and my stories actually help now versus going, okay, what's everyone doing? I think it's really interesting to be like, oh, my lived experience and how I would approach this. So it's been really interesting to kind of do both. They're more like, oh, I'll jump from a project to a project. So it's not, oh, 4 hours. Okay, switch over. It's not like that. It's more like a chunk. But no, it's been really wonderful. So I do that. I'm also teaching. So I teach at Loyola Marymount University. Oh, wow. I'm their creative marketing professor. We have about 4 more weeks to this semester. And then, like I said, Asians in advertising. It's another half-time, full-time thing. And then, is that it? That's it. And speaking. And then my children.
Yeah, I was going to say, and your mom. So
yeah, I'm a mom.
You have a couple things going on.
Yeah, so in terms of what is in the future, I don't know. I love all the pieces I'm doing. And I think it's totally okay to not know. I think there's this pressure to know. Like, you wouldn't believe how many people in January were like, let's plan out your goals. And I was like, no, my goal is to like make it through the day and do a good job every day. I need to do X to be happy. I think that was old me. Like old me was like, okay, we have to get to a title. We have to get to a project. We have to get to this thing. And then therefore I will be happy, right? Yeah. And I was chasing some kind of outside reinforcement of my value. And I think now you can call me whatever title you want in terms of the workplace. I just want to spend time with my kids. I want to just still bring value to students, value to my community. And I think my satisfaction gives from helping versus my achieving. And so I think for me, my goals would still to help people, to touch more lives, to give more people a voice versus a thing.
Yeah. Man, this is a little off topic, but I was just thinking about this the other day. I feel like we overcomplicate happiness. And then look, my background was very much like it was about the career achievements. And it was about the money that we made. Thank God for our mothers, right? And I don't know your dad. And my dad, he's fine. But it's thank God for our mothers that really encouraged us to follow our heart. And I realized happiness is simple. My son was just sleeping on my chest for 2 hours as I watched X-Men 97. And I was like, this is actually all I need. I'm good.
Yeah.
And when was that flip for you from you realized that happiness maybe wasn't the things that we thought it was going to be in our 20s?
Maybe a lot later than you did. I think it was last March. And I was like, forget it. I don't need this. Like, I was actually at a full-time job where I led the creative, and it was so stressful. And I was grinding my teeth at night, and then I was like thinking about the work I was doing. I was like, this isn't worth it. I was like, my body hurts. Like, I feel so tight in my chest. Like, I'm waking up and I'm feeling like this isn't healthy. And I was like, why am I doing this? I was like, is this worth the salary exchange? And it was like one of those moments I was like, it's not. I was like, first, they don't know what they got. Second, it's not worth it. Third, I was just like, I just retired. I have a pretty good savings. Like all these things happen. Like all these things that I think I would have never thought for myself. I always was like hustle, next job, prove myself, all these things. I was like, it finally dawned on me. I was like, who am I proving this to? Why do I need this? It was a moment where I was like, I don't care. I think they say as you get older, you get happier because you care less about these things. And I think it was just like maturity of age, maybe. Like maybe because I turned 40 last year. I was just like, I called my mom. I was like, Mom. And I was like thinking if I should tell my parents and how they would react. And then I was like, you know what? Who cares? I called my mom. I was like, Mom, I retired. And my mom was like, what? And I think I was like, I felt so free when I just let that go. When I was like, I don't know. We'll figure this out, right? Hey, I worked really hard. I have a lot of things going for me. Why do I need this? Who am I doing this for? And I think that instant I just stopped just doing what I was told really opened my mind up to I was never freelancing before this. And the fact that now I am totally freelancing and it's been great. Like this idea of you can make your life what you need versus just trying to fit into the rules that people give you was really eye-opening for me.
Wow. I love that. How incredible. And I think that you figured it out in a pretty good time. If you just turned 40, I know way too many people past that where they haven't figured that out yet.
I don't know if I figured it out, but it's working for now.
For now, it's good. How refreshing. Bernice, look, you have so many things on your plate and you still made time for us today, so I really appreciate that. Thank you so much.
So much fun. No, it's great to have to meet you on a panel, and then now we get to do this in person. No, thank you.
If somebody wanted to connect with you, where can they find you?
You can find me on Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, all the socials. My name is pretty unique, so you probably get me if you just look up Bernice Chow. But if you want my tag, it's Hello Bernice.
Awesome. And to the listeners and the viewers, thank you so much for your time and attention. If you loved the episode, we would dig a 5-star review. If you didn't like it that much, feel free to stick it to us, but subscribe anyway because we're going to have a ton of incredible people just like Bernice Chow back on the show.